it's sad because you have these teachers who are supposed to know how to teach English. They don't know how to teach English, so they rely on you, and you have to think of things on the spot, in front of 30 students. And I've made myself look like a fool and an idiot so many times, and I've tried to think of like lesson plans on the spot where like they failed just horribly.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? In this podcast, we spoke with John, who has spent the past 3 years as an assistant language teacher in Japan. As a quick summary, we dive into his time studying abroad prior to becoming an ALT and how it brought him back to Japan, as well as his experiences working as an ALT, as well as some of the difficulties he's faced on the job. Also, if you like the podcast, don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on YouTube. Also, a quick reminder to join our Discord. It's free to join for a limited time and you'll be able to talk to us or any of our guests, so link is in the description for that. Enjoy! Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the KoreKara Podcast. Today we have a very special guest in my very good friend John, who has been an ALT for 3 years. So lots of good stories coming up. Eric, what do you have to say?
All right, so John, can you give us a little introduction behind who you are and where you are today?
Oh yeah, so I was born in Chicago. And I lived there for about 12 years, moved to Arizona. I lived there for 10 years. And, I was interested in Japan. And I just decided through my school just to go out and visit Japan. And I studied there for about a year. And then I've been working there for about 3 years. That's me, John.
So I heard that you and John met while you guys were studying abroad together. So I just want to start off asking John, what made you get into Japan? What was your decision for choosing to go to study abroad in Japan?
Okay, so my reasoning was that my major in university, I studied cultural anthropology. So I've always been interested in studying different cultures and just traveling in general. And I went to England for 1 month one time. But when I was in England, it was more or less the same. People could speak English, and I could just travel and do whatever. And so I always wanted to try myself and do something different. And I thought, what, Japan always sounds kind of cool. I do like watching anime, and I've always been interested in some Japanese history. So I founded a program through my school where it's you don't needed any Japanese proficiency to join this program. So I just decided to join, and I've been here ever since.
So before you studied abroad, you didn't take any Japanese classes?
None whatsoever.
And then during your study abroad, did you stay with the host family as well?
Yes, I did, which was horrible.
Oh, really?
I did not understand what they were saying. I remember I would bust out my phone and go on Google Translate all the time.
Yeah.
And prior to meeting that family, I remember I wrote them a nice, loving, very well thought out, message to them. And then I threw it to Google Translate and I sent it to them. And it was totally out of context. And it didn't make any sense at all. Now thinking about it.
Was it for a year-long period that you stayed with them?
So I lived with them for about 3 months. And then I had another host family for another 3 months.
I see. So would you say by the end of staying at those host family, at the end of those experiences, you were able to communicate with them effectively, or was it so at the end you were still using Google Translate?
I was still using Google Translate a lot. I was very unconfident. I couldn't really communicate with them well. But I was really glad that my host mom just really took her time with me and just using simple Japanese. And over time, I would just speak little by little to the point where I could have a basic conversation to the point where she was just kept on complimenting me, and then it just boosted my ego, and I was able to speak with her.
So the host family experience itself was good. It was just like there was a communication barrier.
Yeah, overall, yeah.
I guess now, like, backtracking a little bit. So now you're a college student, you're interested in Japan, you're flying in without knowing any Japanese. What was, like, the single most thing that, like, got on your nerves, or, like, that confused you, that was, like, the most, like, I guess, unwelcoming experience for you in Japan?
I remember when I first came in, I was trying to find a trash can for the longest time, and I couldn't find anything. That kind of pissed me off because I had so much garbage, especially coming off the plane. And I just want to get rid of all this stuff, but I couldn't find a trash can.
Yeah, I mean, like, for the trash can, I feel like it could be a total odyssey. Like, you can be searching, like, you can go make a trek through the entire country before you find a trash can.
It doesn't make any sense. But then again, this country, their streets and their roads are so clean and so pretty. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're, like, ethic for making sure that they follow through on a rule or a promise is so high that whenever they do have trash, they have a specific place for it, and they always keep it until they get to that trash can or they get home.
Yeah, I think they usually take all their trash home.
But I remember when I first got off the plane, and the first time I said konnichiwa, I felt super hyped.
Ayo, konnichiwa!
I remember at that time, all I knew was like konnichiwa, gomenasai, and sumimasen. And so you best believe I was busting that at every opportunity that I could. And I remember this little girl just like looked at me and was like giggling. I was like, yeah, I can speak your language. Accept me.
Did you get any compliments just for saying those?
Well, I mean, you probably hear it's like a meme now at this point, but like whenever you say konnichiwa, oh, nihongo jouzu desu ne. And at that time I was like, yeah, my Japanese is amazing. But now it's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, yeah.
Yeah, Eric and I actually talked about this in an earlier podcast, but it's totally one of those things where, like, when you're like first learning, right, it's so encouraging, you know, like, yeah, these guys are like, they're praising me, like, it feels so good. But then when you get to like a certain level, you're like, all right, like, I get it, like I get you're just trying to like be nice and shit, but like, come on, man, like, I'm like properly communicating with you at this point. Like, you don't need to say my nihongo is jozu like every single time.
I think like the worst parts is like when you're having a legit conversation with someone in Japanese, and they are not like saying anything, or they're not adding anything into the conversation. They'll just use "Oh, nihongo jouzu desu ne," and then it just kind of like ends the conversation right there.
Yeah, that happens all the time. It's like shows that they're like not paying attention to the conversation almost, and they're like also judging you on a subconscious level.
They're probably looking at me because I'm like a tall 6'5" white dude from America. So they're like, okay, I don't know what else more to say to this guy, so I'm just gonna say Nihongo Jozu and just get the fuck out.
All right, so at what point during the study abroad did you feel like, yeah, I want to come back to Japan, I want to live my life here?
It's when I met my wife.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So in my second semester, my study abroad program, where they had an event where both Japanese students and foreign students, it wasn't my study abroad program even anyways, it was through the school, where they would just have like a sports taikai, like a sports festival. So they would invite all these Japanese students and all these foreigner students, and we went to this like Japanese style inn near, you know, Mount Fuji, and we were like playing some games and stuff. And I remember, because I get really competitive, and for some reason I was made like team captain of my team for some reason. And I remember like we were like doing like this jump rope game, like this long jump rope game. And there was like maybe a line of like 20 girls, and these girls could not jump for the life of them, and they kept on messing up so much. I was getting so pissed. Little did I know that my future wife was in that group. And so I was yelling and I was screaming. I was like, "What the fuck is going on? Why can't you jump?" And you have all these like girls, like these Japanese, like all these different girls, like just staring at me. And maybe it's just my American side that I get really competitive. I don't know. But later that night, I remember I was seeing my future wife sitting with her friend. We were having like a barbecue, and I was talking to my friend Aaron, and I was like, "Hey," I was like, "Let's go over here and sit with these two girls and talk with them." And at that time, my Japanese was okay, but this girl I was speaking to with, who would later become my future wife, and her English it was good. Yeah, she was talking to me about like what music she liked, and she loved like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Foo Fighters, and I'm like, okay, this girl's lit. I like talking to her, and but at that time, I had another friend who was also interested in her, and so there was kind of like a we were kind of fighting over the same girl to say, but like me personally, right? Like I'm not the one that like targets like really straight, like really hard. Like if I like her, I'm gonna talk to her like a normal person. I'm not gonna be like, hey, what you doing? Let's go on a date. Let's do this. Let's do that. I'm not gonna message her that stuff every day. But my friend, he constantly would like nag her, like, hey, do you want to do this? Hey, do you want to go out here with me? Hey, why are you not talking to me? And I'm like, dude, you need to know that she has her own life too. You got to just chill with it. And so he got really mad and he was like, you know what? Fine, forget about her. And I just kept on talking to her like as a normal human being. And, just I asked her like, what did this mean in Japanese? She also worked at the school in the Japanese plaza as like an instructor as well. So it kind of forced me to go speak Japanese with her because I thought this girl was cute. And so it just forced me to speak with her. And little by little, I got to know her more and more and more. And then before I went back to America, I asked her to be my girlfriend. And yeah, that's history.
Life lesson, guys. Slow and steady wins the race.
It always does. The tortoise in the hare.
So you basically met the love of your life right here
Yes.
during the second semester. So I guess kind of recapping, you come to Japan not knowing anything in terms of Japanese, and you come in and you make friends, you have some highs, you have some lows, you make it all the way through almost an entire year, and you meet this girl and fall in love, and you're like, I want to spend the rest of my life with her. How do I do that?
Exactly. Oh, I never expected to find love coming to Japan. I never expected to, meet anyone. I just came here to have fun, just learn about Japanese and just, bullshit. But it was at that time when I started dating her, and I was like, oh shit, I think this is where I want to be right now. I want to stay in Japan, and I want to like get even better in my Japanese in order to understand her more. So she was the main reason why.
So, what was your, I guess, plan of attack in trying to secure this long-term future?
So in December of 2016, I went back to America while I was dating her. And if you ever go on YouTube and like look up NHK, you would see like a clip of me crying at the airport.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like a clip of me like hugging her and crying her. And I remember at that time I was so pissed because this Japanese news crew ran up to her and they're like, well, why are you crying? Who's that guy? What's wrong? And like she was giving this interview, and then when I saw it later, it just kind of pissed me off because it kind of like ruined that moment with us. But I went back to America and I was like, I need to find a way back to Japan, anyway. And every day, right, I would go on gaijinpod.com and I would just bust out resumes like every day. I would fill out resumes, do interviews, and I would do like these interviews on Skype where I would wear like my suit but then I would wear like my pajamas or like underwear at the bottom. So I was glad that like no one asked me to stand up. And I kept on doing this for a long time. And I would stay up really late doing these interviews, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And finally, this one company, accepted me, and they hired me, and I came back in March of 2017, and I've been here ever since.
So what exactly was that job that you got hired for? Like, what exactly were you doing?
Yeah, just the ALT, just teaching English as an assistant language teacher at a public elementary school.
So I guess for those of you who don't know what, I guess, ALT is versus just a regular English teacher, you want to kind of explain the difference of what the assistant kind of means in there?
So, okay. ALT legit just assists the main English teacher. So the main English teacher is the one that's supposed to teach everything. He's the one that's supposed to like teach the English grammar points. He's the one that's supposed to make the lessons, and I'm just there to pretty much say it how a native would say it in English.
So is the English teacher usually a Japanese person?
Yes. So yeah, usually the English teacher is Japanese, and but like the teacher would ask me to make games for the students. So like I would think of like different game ideas and every day and just play with the students. And but it's a little different because if you're in elementary school, you're the one that's supposed to like think of like all the lesson plans, and you're the one that's supposed to do everything, because those English teachers, to be honest, kind of suck. And they can't really speak English at all. So I don't know why they were hired as English teachers at the first place. That might have been my school. I don't know. It's different for each school.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot in Japan. I saw this one TV show where they went and interviewed like English teachers in a lot of like jukus, and they had this one guy who's like who's a 20-year-old veteran of like teaching English, and they asked him like, what's your favorite fruit? And he like couldn't understand the question and couldn't answer it.
Yeah, no, it's really like that. It's sad because you have these teachers who are supposed to know how to teach English. They don't know how to teach English, so they rely on you, and you have to think of things on the spot, in front of 30 students. And I've made myself look like a fool and an idiot so many times, and I've try to think of like lesson plans on the spot where like they failed just horribly. And at the elementary school that I was working at, because I always try to make an effort to like have a meeting with the Japanese native teacher, but they were always busy. So when it came time to like actually teaching our lessons together, they would like stand in the back in the classroom and they would just like watch me the whole time. So it was really intimidating at the time, because like I needed some support because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just doing everything on the fly as I go. But I slowly started getting kind of good at my job, after that. And so yeah, I did that. I worked at a public elementary school for 1 year, and then I did a public junior high school for 2 years. And like the level between the two is really different. Because like the teachers in junior high school, they were legitimately hired, as English teachers, so they can speak English, and they can teach it properly. They can teach the rules, the grammars, and whatnot. So my role became at that time just like reading from a book. They would just ask me to read something out loud from a book, and I just became turned into a human tape recorder, and I felt bad for the students because like the students, all they did was just like, paperwork all the time or book work all the time. And I always tried to ask like the Japanese native teacher, like, how about we do it this way? Or how about we implement this game or this activity? And they're like, well, since I'm doing something that I've been doing for like 20 years, I don't want to change it right now for you. And that's the kind of feeling that I've always got. And it reflects on the students because like the students, they just kind of look miserable. They don't really care about learning, English at that time. So if they lose interest in it, I know I was starting to lose interest in teaching, and then I was just maybe looking for different opportunities after that.
How was the work-life balance? Like, did you have to work a lot of hours? And also, were you able to get placed like somewhere close to where your girlfriend was?
So when I moved back here, I was living with my Saudi Arabian friend again, and he was cool. He let me live with him for like a couple months until he kicked me out. And then I moved in at my girlfriend's apartment, and it was this one like studio small bedroom apartment. It was really small, and we lived there for about a couple months. And I said, how about we move into something bigger together? And she was like, yeah, I would like that. But she was like, you have to talk to my dad first. And I was terrified. I was like, I have to talk to your dad. And so I'm really nervous. And she like, she calls him and she hands me the phone. And like, I'm like asking him in like super broken Japanese, like, can I move in with your daughter? And he was like, yeah, sure, go for it. I was like, oh, okay, shit, cool. I mean, her mom is a little like apprehensive about me because she doesn't really know me, but the dad, for some reason, really likes me. So he's really cool. And he told me later what his reasoning was. He said that because like I came back to Japan, I got a job, and that I picked up this responsibility. That he said that like he was comfortable for allowing me to date his daughter at that time. I wasn't here just like to knock up his daughter and then move back to Japan, that type of thing. So he was really cool. So we moved into a bigger apartment together, and the first school, the elementary school, I had to commute about an hour and a half every day, and by train, and I did that
Was
for a
it just
year.
one way?
Yeah, it was like 45 minutes one way and then 45 minutes
Oh, I
back.
see.
And so I did that for a year, but it was just really costly, and I couldn't afford that. And I was buying those the like the commuter pass, but they were like $300 a month, and I couldn't afford that. And my company didn't pay for transportation at that time, so I was looking for something that was a little closer to where I lived, and I found my second company, and that was the public junior high school, and that place was only like 2 stations away from where I lived, where I'm living now.
But the work-life balance itself was good.
It was good, yeah. Like I didn't have to do overtime, if it was my time to go, I got my stamp from the vice principal, and then I left, and like no one really expected me to do any more than what I had to do. I didn't have to do overtime. I didn't have to, kind of like participate like in a lot of like the Japanese nomikai that they have with each other, because they knew that I was an assistant, so that I was going to leave anyways. So they didn't really want to invest their time in me, pretty much. And but like the work life was good. The schools, yeah, like I would come in the mornings. I would, like prepare whatever lesson I had to do for the day, and they would have a meeting, and then we would have our first class, and I had a schedule every week, so every day like the number of classes I would teach was different, like 2 or 3 classes. So that means that I would have like 2 or 3 periods that were just empty, and I could just do whatever. So there was a lot of time when I had nothing to do, so I I studied Japanese by myself a lot. I just bought those JLPT books, and I just studied by myself. And at that time is when I forced myself to like learn kanji. And I bought this like thick like 1,000 word, like 1,000 kanji book, and had like different pictures. And I would just study that every day and every day, and I would just speak with the different teachers. And everyone was pretty cool. They would help me, whenever they had free time. And no one really, expected me to do more, you know.
So it was still like a 40-hour per week, like 8 hours per day job.
At my first company, so technically, it was like you have to work 40 hours, but you get paid like 30 hours or something. So it was kind of sketch, but maybe that was the reason why they hired me so easily, because like I didn't know at that time. I didn't really
Yeah.
take the time to read my contract carefully. But it was just the transportation cost was killing me. So I had to find something that was closer. So that's why I decided to change companies to my previous company.
So would you say for incoming ALT, this is very important to like properly read the contract and the documentation before actually accepting the job?
I would say so, yeah. I would say just make sure you just take the time, read everything in the contract, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because I was lucky where most ALT companies, they will find an apartment for you, and most of those apartments are kind of shitty, just really small, really dinky. And I was living with my wife at that time, my girlfriend, and so I was lucky where I didn't have to rely on my company for an apartment. So I kind of lucked out on that. But to future ALTs or future Jets or whatever who want to come out and, work in Japan, teach in Japan, I would make sure bring a lot of money beforehand, because renting an apartment is ridiculous, because you not only have to pay the first month's rent, you have to pay also what is called the key money. And then that's like some money you're supposed to give to the landlord. And then there's like another like month's like rent you're supposed to give. So it's like 3 months rent in 1 month you're supposed to pay. So
Were there external hurdles that like being a foreigner and trying to rent?
well, because I had my wife at the time, she did all the communication for me.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, I kind of lucked out on that.
I see. And I guess speaking to something you mentioned earlier, you said that your coworkers weren't really invested in you. So since you're an ALT, and just for some context for everyone, ALTs, I guess you have to go in, there's a time where you have to change where you're working, right? Periodically.
Yeah.
So since they weren't invested in you, would you say it was very difficult, I guess, making friends at work or really having any professional relationships?
It was difficult. Yeah. I mean, so my company, or the school that I was studying, or not studying, but teaching at, they would put my desk next to the head English teacher. And so I became close with him. But the problem is that like in the office, in the teacher's office, everyone has like cliques and everyone has like groups. So like you would have like just a group of women over here, you have a bunch of group of men over here. And so it was trying to like finding your group. And since you can't really speak the language really well, it was kind of difficult to join in those groups, and no one would really take the time to like speak with you. So it was kind of difficult, because I felt lonely at times, because like I just wanted to like speak and get to know these people, and I just felt like they would not reciprocate.
Did you ever have to use Japanese for your job? And did that ever help like come in handy?
I do it with the teachers, but never with the students, because I was told that you're not supposed to speak Japanese with the students. But then later I said fuck that, because it makes life so much easier and much more better if you're able to communicate with the students, because you want to build like rapport, you want to get to know these kids, right? You want these kids to like you. And if I'm constantly like speaking to you in English, like, how is your day? How is the weather? What is this? These kids are not going to be interested, or they're going to get nervous. And I've made kids cry all the time by trying to have like a simple English conversation with them. So I would just switch to Japanese and just speak to Japanese outside of the English lesson. During the English lesson, it was just English only. But like during lunch, I would speak Japanese with the students. I would participate in some of like their clubs. So I was in the badminton club at my one school, and at another school, like I participated in like the track and field club for a little bit. So that was fun.
And Was it frustrating dealing with the Japanese English learning system? Like you were kind of mentioning before that there's a lot of rules that you have to follow and that a lot of like even like the teachers' plans are very rigid. Was it frustrating, I guess, dealing with that and kind of not really being able to, I guess, express your individuality?
Oh yeah, because in Japan, no one really thinks for themselves, and all the teachers have, a plan that works well in their mind, you know, but it's something that they all use together. And so if you're trying to add something new to it, your individual perspective to it, they're kind of, they don't really care, or they don't really take the time to like, introduce that perspective or the idea into their lessons or whatnot. So it was difficult.
And I guess building off of that, what are your thoughts on the Japanese English teaching system in general?
It's terrible. It is terrible because, like I said earlier, like the Japanese English system is very old. It's very rigid. It's like what they've taught the same way for like 20, 30 years, and nothing really ever changes. And I always focused on speaking ability versus like reading and writing. I know those are very important, but I also thought that for an early age that speaking is the number one. Because in our situation, right, everyone when we were born, like we didn't know how to read or write, but we constantly got input from our family, our moms and whatnot, and we constantly hear people speaking. So the first thing we do is we speak, we repeat back to what they said. So I try to use that idea in my lessons, but it wasn't something a lot of the teachers necessarily agreed with. It kind of goes against their way of how they were taught. So it was difficult at those times.
I guess kind of recapping for everyone what we've got up till now. So John previously studied abroad in Japan for a year and met the love of his life, decided to come back to Japan to work as an English teacher, and has currently been working as an English teacher for 3 years strong. So I guess getting back to I guess the idea of not really being able to do anything and the idea of being frustrated. What is your idea of Japan now that you've been here for 4 years, 1 year including the study abroad?
That's a good question. I felt like the image of Japan has kind of shattered in a sense. When I first came here, I was really excited. I was like, okay, this is the stuff I see in, anime, or this is the stuff that I see on, like the History Channel about Japan or whatever. And, oh, this is how Japan is. But now that I've been living here and I'm learning the ins and outs of like Japanese society and work cultures, it's kind of changed my perspective of how I see Japan. I love it. I love living here, but then there's a lot of things that I don't really necessarily agree and I don't like, such as the working culture. It's very toxic. If you don't kiss up, to your senpai or like the people who are, above you, you're never gonna like, your role in society is never gonna improve. So you always kind of have to work in a group. You have to think as a family, as you have to think of as a group together, while kind of like kissing up to those people who came before you. Versus like us in America, we were like raised and taught to think more for ourselves, more individuality. And it's that concept is very difficult, I believe.
What about the teaching job and the teaching occupation really led you to just want to quit?
It was not my school. It wasn't the students. It wasn't the teachers, because I actually liked some of the teachers. It was the company that I worked for. It was a third party, what is called a dispatch company, where they would hire foreigners from different places around the world, right? And they would place them at these schools. And I just didn't necessarily agree with a lot of like what my boss was saying or his point of view on things. For example, one thing was like he always said that like you're not supposed to speak Japanese at all to anyone, not even to the teachers. And I would say to him that like, you know, how are we supposed to like get communication? How are we supposed to communicate with these people? I'm not gonna waste my time, you know, like doing gestures to make these Japanese teachers understand what I want to teach to my students, you know? I would just say it in Japanese. And the company, what else? They never really, like, every time when I asked something from them, they never really like replied back quickly with, you know, they never really replied back to me quickly. And they always took their time, and they were never really serious. And especially after every contract, like your company would move you to another school, but you would not know what school you were moving to until the day of, or the couple days before you were supposed to teach at that new school. So it's just little things like that that just kind of made me not want to teach English anymore.
But since it was mostly the dispatch company that made you not want to teach, would you like rule out teaching English completely, or do you think it's something you might come back to later on?
If I was hired through the Japanese Board of Education as a legit English teacher, yes, I would do it. But not through the dispatch company. Yeah.
So would you say it was the specific company, or would you recommend, I guess, other incoming ALTs like Jet or another company? Do you think it's something across every company that is like similar?
So I've worked for 2 ALT companies at this point, and they're more or less the same. They're very similar. I can't speak for Jet. I don't know. There's also Eikaiwa, which is more English conversation, and that's more like either one-on-one with a person or small classes. But I've heard like bad stories about that as well. Like I had a friend who was working at an Eikaiwa, and she told me like she couldn't take breaks. She was constantly being recorded by a camera, so she couldn't like do anything for herself, and she always had to work. So it was just very strict, and I just didn't want that.
Well, so earlier you said that you were still studying Japanese, like during your ALT career, like you would spend your free time like studying for the JLPT. Did you ever take the JLPT? And also, how good would you say that your Japanese is now?
I took the JLPT 3 times. I took the N3, I failed it. I took the N2 twice, and I failed it once. And then on my 3rd time, I passed it by 51%. So I barely passed. Because you're supposed to get like a 50% in order to pass the test, right? It's like 90 out of 180 points or something like that. And I got like a 92. And I remember that day too, right? Because I remember I'm taking the test, and prior to that, like I drank a bunch of orange juice, and like my bladder was full, and so like I had to take a piss so badly during the test, and they the instructors like who are watching us, they're like, you can't go to the bathroom until like break time, and I was like, I'm about to pee my pants right now. I was looking at my empty like plastic water bottle. I was like, should I do it right here, right now? But like this one guy came next to me, and I asked him, I was like, this is an emergency. I got to go to the bathroom right now. And he was like, okay, cool. And he walked me, and I had all these people just like looking at me, thinking that like I did something like illegal or something. And he follows me into the bathroom, and he was just like watching me piss.
You? Yeah. Wow, like a drug test.
It was like a drug test. And then I went back and I finished the test, and I got my 92. my 51%. But
Do you
yeah,
think you'll go for the N1?
maybe. Um, I feel like I'm comfortable right now with the N2. I feel like if you want the N1, that's just more like, you know, I think more like scholarly, Japanese, more like
Right.
literature, literal Japanese, and a lot more harder concepts. I think maybe one day I would like to take it just to see how it is, but not anytime soon.
But as for speaking, are you like really comfortable speaking now?
Yeah, I think so. I would say so. Um, Living with my wife, I speak to her all the time, and before Corona, I used to go to this like language exchange in Tokyo and just speak with people all the time. So I feel like now I became more comfortable speaking at this point.
So, what was, I guess we can get into Corona later, but to kind of keep staying on, I guess, your work life,
Yeah.
what was the highest that it was and what was the lowest?
The highest has to be when I won, oh, the student who I was helping with the English speech contest won first place in her city. So that was lit. Yeah. And actually, that year, I had three students who were participating in the speech contest. One got first place in her city, and the other girl got third place in her city. So that was like my highest high. And they were really good. They wrote out their speeches, and it took me like a month or two to kind of like refix and reword everything.
Hmm.
But after like I reworded it and refixed it, I worked with those students every day, like after lunch, after school, just for a little bit, for like an hour or so. And I would just
Hmm.
help them like, with pronunciation, how to memorize the words, where to put certain stresses at certain words, where to like stop at certain places. So that was cool. And my lowest low has to be, I think, when Corona did happen, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next for my career. I don't know like how Corona is going to affect school. I don't know how Corona is going to affect the, English teaching, you know, my English teaching job. And I was always asking my recruiter, the person who hired me, like for help and stuff, and she wouldn't really help me. And we had like some arguments and stuff, and like I said some things to her that I shouldn't have said, and it was a very stressful time, I would to say.
I see. And I guess you also mentioned the actual kids that you were teaching, and you also had said that that was actually really rewarding. But was, I guess, for an incoming ALT, what should they expect when teaching Japanese kids? Because of course, like a lot of people are coming in with no experience, and is there anything special, I guess, about Japanese kids that maybe differentiates them, or something that you wouldn't expect at all when you start teaching them?
I would say don't expect too much from the beginning, because most of those kids can't speak English at all, you know. So don't go trying to teach them really complex, sentences and grammar, because those kids would not understand. There's even students in junior high school, they couldn't even understand how to like say, "Oh, hi, my name is, so and so." And so don't expect too much from the students' English speaking abilities. However, there are some students that are really good, but most of those students go to like Juku, which is like after school, like where they just like study whatever after school.
Hmm.
And then there's some students who go to like those private companies such as ECC, which is like a Eikaiwa, an English conversation school. So those students were really good, but those students were so far, you know, their 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 speaking abilities was so much better than the rest of the students. And the problem was you can't adjust your lesson for every student, in particular. So you would have to
Hmm.
kind of make it simpler for everyone. And the students who were really good, they would either get bored, or after the lesson, they would talk to you and ask you a lot of different things. So it was really rewarding, speaking with those students, I would say.
I see. But what's, I guess, the weirdest thing that you experienced with students just teaching at any level?
The weirdest thing? I mean, I've seen a lot of weird things. Like, if you're going to elementary school, you might get fingers up your butt a lot. Yeah. During like cleaning time, whatnot, like kids, Japanese boys especially, they have this game, or it's called kansho. They just like stick 2 fingers up their ass, and then they run away. So like whenever I would like bend over and clean something, there's always a little kid that's like shoving fingers up my ass, and it scared me. And or like for some reason, like I don't know why little Japanese boys do this, but like they would purposely like grab your junk, like like your dick, and I'm like, is this like some sort of like, are they like sizing up to me or something, like seeing where they like stand with me?
It's a power play.
Like the power play. It was so weird. And I remember I would have to like karate chop kids all the time. I'm like, what are you doing? Bah, bah, bah. And I remember I made this kid cry one time because like I kind of like pushed his hand up, like kind of hard because I didn't want him to touch me there. And I was trying to explain to the teacher. I said, what's up with like, boys touching, like my dick? And that sounds weird saying it, but like but it's true. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's just a normal thing. It's just a normal thing boys do here in Japan. And I'm like, okay. So I would always, from that point on, like I would put like my butt like close to the wall, so like kids wouldn't like put their fingers up my butt, or like I would hold like a bottle or something like in my front area. I've seen a bunch of just weird kids doing just crazy shit. I've seen it's like especially in junior high school too, like because like everyone's going through puberty. And so they don't know like how to really like express themselves. Like you have like girls like they're trying to flirt with you, and I'm just like I push that shit to the side. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm your fucking teacher. Get that shit away from me. And I remember this one girl she would like come up to me and she was like, don't you think I'm pretty? Don't you think I'm beautiful? And I'm like, yeah, you're cute. And I was like, but everyone else is cute too. And so I'm like, get that shit away from me. I don't want to get like locked up abroad,
It's like the FBI is like testing you. It's like a random drug test. Like
it is, no matter where.
Damn. I mean, I also heard one really weird thing that Japanese boys, like specifically in elementary school, do is like they just whip out their dicks randomly. Yep. Is that?
Yep. I saw a little first grade boy. He just whipped out his dick randomly, and he's just playing it. And there's this little first grade girl next to him, and she's just staring at it, and she doesn't understand what's happening. I mean, her brain is not processed yet at that point. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm trying to whisper in his ear. I'm like, hey, maybe you should put that away or whatever. And and I go to the teacher, and the teacher is like, you know what, shogunai. It is what it is. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean, shogunai? It's like weird shit like that. I've seen kids pull out their dicks. I saw a kid like piss in the corner one time. I saw a kid like shit in the toilet. Or not the toilet, but like the trash can. And so yeah, any future ALTs or whoever wants to come, hopefully you're ready.
Overall, would you recommend going to Japan as an ALT if your goal is just to go to Japan, or would you say like try to find anything else?
If you want to live here for a long time, coming to Japan as an ALT is good for a couple years. But if you want to do anything else, especially in Japan, you should probably quit as soon as possible and start working on another skill that you can use towards your next job. Because most of these companies here in Japan, based off what I've known, is they like to hire a lot of foreigners who do IT work. They like to hire a lot of foreigners who do like translating work. So if you want to live in Japan for a long time, ALT work is cool and all, but it doesn't look really good on the resume, you know, for a long time. So me personally, I'm always trying to like push myself. I always want to do something, doing something that betters myself.
Would you say that becoming an ALT was something that you wouldn't do if you were able to do it again? Like, what kind of, I guess, what do you feel like ALT is nowadays?
I mean, I'm grateful. Like through my ALT job, I was able to come back, but you know, it's just I've seen and met a lot of people who are ALTs that have been doing it for like 20, 30 years. And it's
Oh
like,
my god.
I met this one guy and he's doing it for 20 years and you can just tell that there was something off about him. And I just felt like, and it's always those type of people. It's always those type of people. And I just tell myself, like, I don't want to become like that. I don't want to become like that fucking weird foreigner, you know? And so I'm trying to like get out as soon as possible. And he was just telling me, like, he was asking me, like, how do you meet women? And I'm like, you've been here for 20 years, dude. Like, can't you speak it? Can't you speak Japanese? He's like, no, I can't speak Japanese. I'm like, what the fuck have you been doing for 20 years of your life? So it's just like, yeah, weird people like that. For me personally, now that I've quit, I just associate ALT with like just strange foreigners from whatever country and really fucking stupid, rigid, old like teaching styles.
I guess now kind of summing up all your 3 years of Japanese teaching, and I guess this chapter coming to a close, how has it been now with, I guess, Corona coming in here, and I guess you trying to find a new job kind of intercepting with that? What has, I guess, the process been like, and how has it been? Has it been a lot more difficult? Has it been stressful?
So I knew that this year was going to be my last year teaching English, because I got my spouse visa, which allows me to like I can work wherever now. And this was before Corona became a big thing. And I told my company I was going to quit at the end of my contract. Don't renew it. I'm just going to quit. And that was back in March. But at that time, Corona got really bad and really crazy. And I remember the mayor of Tokyo, she locked down Tokyo for like a weekend just to see if they can like maintain, just Tokyo, not have the spread of Corona spread to other prefectures. But that didn't really work. And so like Abe, the prime minister, he started slowly like, locking down all these different prefectures. So I just quit. This was in March. And then 2 months where I couldn't really go out. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't find work. So I was just stuck at home all day. And it sucked because like I'm in a situation where my wife, I mean, I guess she's considered an essential worker here. I mean, she had to go to work, and I just felt like I just felt really useless because like I wasn't able to work and like provide, for her. And but it was nothing I could have done. It was just a situation, right? And so after it was like May, at the end of May is when the lockdown ended, when the lockdown lifted. And the beginning of June, I just started applying like nonstop to different companies. But the problem is that most of these companies, I think they're still kind of apprehensive or afraid to like hire new people. Just they don't want to spread, the disease, the virus anymore. And so a lot of these companies told me like, oh, we'll call you back later, or we'll send a message here later. And they just kind of put the whole job finding process like on freeze for a while. And I had a lot of like connects who I thought I could trust, but when Corona happened, all those connects kind of just disappeared. So I was kind of shit out of luck. So I didn't know what to do, and I before I quit, I saved up enough money because I knew maybe it would take like a couple months before I find my next job. I wasn't expecting like this corona to happen. I wasn't expecting it how it would affect the economy. I didn't expect how it would affect pretty much everything. It affects all of our lives. And to this day, it's still difficult trying to find work. It's slowly the company, not the company, but Japan is like slowly reopening up everything. They're having foreigners from like certain countries able to come back to Japan, but it's difficult right now as a foreigner trying to find work in a, I wouldn't even say a post lockdown, Japan. We're still kind of in like a semi quasi lockdown.
And what kind of work are you looking for right now? Like, are you trying to apply to just like normal Japanese positions? Because I know you have N2, so you could like work in it as a Japanese salaryman too.
Me personally, I did not want to work at a Japanese company because I've heard of stories of just like working overtime and like dying from overtime. What was that word called? Koroshi. Yeah, and there was I heard a story where a girl like last year worked like 169 hours in 1 week, and she only had like 5 hours of sleep, and she just died from exhaustion. So just shit like that. And I knew, even though I had my N2, my Japanese it wasn't really good enough where I was able to like go to like interviews, because there's like a certain like way of speaking and certain way of using keigo, and I'm to this day I'm still not used to like keigo and like the polite speaking of Japanese, and a lot of companies kind of won't hire you just based off like how you sound. If you don't sound Japanese, they won't hire you pretty much. So I started to not look at Japanese companies, but I started to looking at what is called gaishike kigyo, which is like foreign-owned companies. And so, like, I applied to Apple because I thought Apple would be cool just to work at the Apple store in downtown Tokyo. But like, I haven't gotten a response from them, and I always thought like, in America when you're doing the job, finding process, it's okay to contact those people, like to see how, like, what your application's up, like how is it doing and whatnot. But I guess you're not supposed to do that in Japan because it's considered rude. So I don't know. Right before Corona happened, I was interested in either working at the Apple store, or doing something with tourism. But Corona happened, and then that kind of just killed the tourism industry. So right now, I'm just looking for whatever. But, we'll just see. Lately, there's been new cases of Corona happening, and I'm just hoping and praying that, this doesn't affect that. So that's really what my frustration is just trying to find work right now.
So I guess now looking back, like through your story, you come from you were a senior in college, you had a sudden interest in Japan sparked, come to the Japan for an entire year just because it's kind of like, I guess, more of a passion project, and you kind of go through the highs and the lows. You go meet your wife, you come back to Japan, and you have your 3 years, and now you're back here searching for work. But you don't need to, I guess, deal with the visa situation because you have a marriage visa. And now, I guess, we kind of have this all lined up. But if you were to go back through all of this again, is there anything you would change? And if so, what would that be?
There is one time last year where I was meeting a friend, and he I think he is still working at a company where they do foreign trading. So they would take products from their company and try to sell them to like America or Canada or English speaking countries. And he was talking to me about his company. But the problem at that time was he wanted me to work as soon as possible. And I couldn't just break my ALT contract at that time. And now thinking about it, I should have just broke my contract early and just jumped over to his company, because I wouldn't be in the situation that I am in right now. But it is what it is, I think.
Well, so since you're already married in Japan, do you think that you'll stay in Japan for like the rest of your life, or do you think that at some point you and your wife might like move back to America or live somewhere
That's a
else?
good question. I don't know. It depends. If we have kids, um, I, the Japanese education system kind of sucks. So I would like to raise my children in a more international or a more American education system. But she said that she would like to live in America for a couple of years just to try it out. So we might just maybe go between both countries for a while.
All right, guys. I think it's a good time to wrap it up, though. Very, very big thank you to John for coming on the podcast and telling us a lot about his life, what he's doing in Japan, his journey to this point. I have heard some rumblings. John may have some pretty cool projects coming up. So I'll be keeping you guys posted on the Discord. So if you guys are interested, make sure to join the Discord and see John's future projects when they come up.
Yeah. Make sure to follow us. And if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button and the bell. And if you want to support us, you can support us on Patreon. But thanks for listening.
John, before we go, is there anything you want to tell our viewers? Any words of encouragement or just something you'd like to say?
Oh yeah, just look out for KoreKara's, Discord. I'll be putting something on there very soon. I'm not going to disclose any information right now, but you'll see it on the Discord at first. And, but yeah, no, just like, if you want to come to Japan, please come to Japan. It's a great country, but like anywhere you go, you're going to find weird people, so and you'll find them in the movie theater, maybe. Yeah, that's it.
I think that's a perfect note to sign off, guys. Don't be doing stuff in the movie theater. Alright, guys. Thank you guys for listening to the KoreKara Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode with John. I'm sure some of you may be wondering what John was referring to at the end of the video. You can find out on our Patreon exclusive clip, so please be sure to check that out. Also, listen to us on the go anytime with Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and join our Discord. Peace.
Peace.